Most businesses are pretty forgettable. It's not that they're bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that they don't actually make people and their target audience feel anything on the inside. In this episode of Humans of Growth, John from Human Design and I get into the hard truth that a lot of business owners, and to be honest, a lot of agencies miss. People are not choosing and buying based upon who has the most polished, put together brand, the smartest message, the longest list of features. They're choosing the brand, they're choosing the business that feels human, that feels authentic, that makes them feel seen, known, and valued, and the one that makes them feel like the brand, the business cares about them. If your brand looks really good, but is getting ignored, this episode is for you. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, John, I introduced a little of the professional side of you, but in a sentence or two, who are you as a human? What is bringing you joy right now?
I am a husband of 30 years. Well,
Okay.
let me phrase that better. I've been with my wife for 30 years. We've been married for 22.
Okay.
Met in high school. We have 4 kids, 4 lovely children. I teach at the University of Colorado in addition to owning and running Human. And what keeps or gets me excited, I think was part of the question, is just staying curious and trying to learn something new every day and try to really maximize the impact.
What's the most recent thing you've learned that has nothing to do with marketing?
Oh, dang. Well, this has nothing to do with marketing, but actually, I don't know. Let me think about it because it's all been work related. Okay, I am listening to a great book. It's an oldie, but a goodie. It's called Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm kind of learning about culture and how they set the creative culture there. And it's been pretty good.
I love that. So today we're starting with all things human-centered marketing because the name of your company is Human Design, so we can't not talk about the humans behind everything. So I've noticed recently in the past couple years, probably the past 3 to 4 years, we talk a lot more about human-centered marketing compared to the faceless corporation marketing that doesn't have a really the motion behind stuff. So because you work so much with the human side of marketing, what does it mean for a brand to actually be and feel human?
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 sides that we're seeing on our end with customers. So the B2C side and the B2B side. And then, of course, we joke around at Human that there's the H to H side. It's just human to human. But what I'm finding really interesting is there's still a bifurcation in the marketplace in the minds of the people we work with on the business side. So if we're working with a B2B, they're less likely to buy into what you just said. They're less likely to buy into the emotional side because they're like, well, at the end of the day, we're B2B and we're just selling on numbers and metrics, which is really unfortunate. On the consumer side, what it means is that brands are finally waking up to the idea that science is correct, that 95% of decisions are based on emotion. They're rationalized later by logic. A lot of people first learned that concept in the book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Systems 1 thinking, systems 2 thinking. Brands are finally buying into that idea that we have to hit an emotional epicenter for the consumer to resonate with our brand and buy into what we're presenting to them. In order to hit that emotional epicenter, you have to be more human. You're not going to base your marketing on facts and figures and comparison charts. That's not going to win the day. What's going to win the day is what lights someone up emotionally. It doesn't always have to be joy. We talk about it human. There's 27 core emotions. It's not distilled down to fear, joy, anger, fear of missing out. There's some nuance to that. So when you talk about brands being more human, it's hitting that emotional core so that you truly resonate with someone. And then brands are talking about the outcome of that being like what Brene Brown talks about belonging. What's interesting about Brene Brown is she didn't come into the business angle, I don't believe. I think her original books were more focused on human connection, human to human. And then businesses started seeing the benefit of that and then talking in brand language of how do we be a brand that is beloved, that feels like we belong naturally with the consumer. And I think the last point I'll make on all of this is the trick is how do you do it in a way that feels genuinely authentic and not manipulative? Because as soon as you say, I want them to make a decision based on emotion, that feels inherently manipulative. If I say, hey, Aly, I want you to decide to go do something with my family and I'm trying to immediately think about how can I hit Aly's emotions to get her to be convinced, that feels inherently manipulative.
Right.
And I think the trick is like, no, it's not manipulative. It's as long as we are actually asking Aly as a human being to do something that we feel is good for her and that we feel once she experiences it, it's going to make her life better.
I love that. Let's go back to something you said earlier, the 95%. And I love neuroscience, but maybe everybody else here doesn't or isn't familiar with it. So tell me about decision-making processes within our human brain and how do we
Yeah.
take that? How does that translate to marketing? Give me all the nitty-gritty of that.
Okay. So that's really good. I'll distill it down to two principles that I would kind of say are two sides of the same coin when you talk about decisions based on emotion. So one is that decisions are usually made within 3 to 5 seconds. So they're made based on your instincts. And that has to happen through the emotional layer, not the logic layer. As fast as your brain can process, it's not going to process all the psychodynamics at play. Oh, decisions to be made. What's the impact today, tomorrow, 3 years out, 5 years out? What does this have to do with my identity yesterday, a week ago, 3 weeks ago? There's so many psychodynamics that come into the logic side of it that have to kind of be processed through and reasoned. Doesn't mean that people
Yep.
cannot make decisions based on logic immediately, but human beings are faced with so many choices throughout their day that their survival instinct is how do I make a decision within 3 to 5 seconds? We have to. It's fight or flight. And if I'm going to process this decision and make a long, really think about it, I'm not going to survive. So human beings instinctually feel like we have to make a decision within 3 to 5 seconds. We have to, you're not going to be able to do that through logic. Your instinct and your emotion and your soul and your essence is going to lead the way and make that decision quickly. Over time, the logic will rationalize it. And that's where you'll hear people say, well, if they're protecting their decision, they're mitigating, and they don't want to make a decision right there, and they don't know the logic. That's where you'll hear people say, you know what, I don't know yet. Let me sleep on it. Because they know they're protecting themselves. They don't want to make an emotional decision. They want to sleep on it, meaning they want their brain to be able to process it fully and not have to make a decision within 3 to 5 seconds. You'll also hear them mitigate that on the back end, right? Like they'll make a decision. I may say, hey, Aly, let's do this, but I reserve the right after I sleep on it to come back tomorrow and make a different decision. But we're also talking about things that don't have to be decided right then versus purchasing, real time where you're asking them to buy right now and you have to decide right now. So to summarize that point, humans survival, I have to make a decision within 3 to 5 seconds. Logically, I'm probably not going to be able to process. So it's based on my emotion, my instinct. How do I feel? And I need to trust my feelings right now, here in that moment. The other side of it around the science is that typically if a thing meets 2 to 3 of your human basic needs, certainty, uncertainty, significance, love, connection, if that thing instinctually checks off 2 to 3 of those things right away, you're going to make a decision to grab it. And you're probably not going to be able to articulate it, but subconsciously so subconsciously, they did a good job of making me feel certain, feel heard, feel significant, and feel loved. So yes, I'm going to say yes to that thing.
I like it.
So
And go
yeah,
ahead. And I think we're talking about B2B versus B2C and how B2C is much more emotion driven, because I think of when I'm making B2B buying decisions, I'm going to take more time. I tend to think about that, especially depending on who you're selling to. There's multiple decision makers. So logic does get pulled in a lot more
Yes.
compared to I'm at the grocery store and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to cook for this week. And I don't know how to cook. And I'm in fight.
Yeah.
Anybody who's walking into a grocery store, we are in fight or flight, whether we like to
Yeah.
admit that or not. And that's where you see the B2C behavior of like, okay, what's the emotion behind it? Whether I'm
Right.
grocery shopping or I'm shopping for new clothes, I have to, in my head, I know this isn't actually true logically, but in my head, I have to make a decision about, am I going to buy this shirt here or now? Am I going to buy this brand of pasta versus this brand of pasta? Right then, right there when I'm on that aisle. And so it is very much more emotions driven when you're in the B2C environment.
Yes, I agree with a caveat though.
Okay.
I don't know if it's more emotionally driven holistically.
Okay.
Well, actually, let me back up. I agree that it's more emotionally driven holistically when it's to a consumer versus to a business buyer. However, the tip of the spear of the brand aesthetic and look and feel and the things that we portray visually of what we value are equally as important on the emotional level from a business buyer as they are a consumer.
Okay.
Because here's my thinking on that. A business buyer, if I look at what you offer, I'm like, Aly, that's really interesting. I don't know if I want that for my business, and I'm not the sole decision maker. I need to build a coalition. I need 3 other people to say yes to this. But I'm the first line of defense of whether or not I want to introduce this to my coworkers. The very first thing I'm going to be doing is subconsciously judging the level of intent, the level of quality, the level of thought leadership. And without reading your facts and figures or going into your information, I will be doing that through the aesthetic layer. I will be doing that from this immediate implication of this is a business that takes themselves seriously. They feel high quality. They feel pro. And within 1 to 2 seconds, I will immediately vet whether or not you are even worth my time as a business before I even go look at the stats.
That's fair. Totally fair. So
but it is interesting. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
So when it comes to making people have that emotional connectedness to a brand, what all goes into that?
The first piece, the biggest piece is really knowing who you are as a brand. And when you have to have a very clear conviction on what you stand for your values, and then your value. So your values, that's Simon Sinek. Why do we exist? But at the end of the day, a lot of people, I actually think I love his model. It changed the way I thought 15 years ago whenever it came out. I do believe that things have evolved where people don't buy your why. We don't know why they buy you. They might buy your what, they might buy your how, they might buy your why. But some people might care less. Our mission at Human is to move the human race. If I tell that to a certain buyer, they might not give a rip. They might be like, I don't care that you guys want to move the human race. I want to know that you're going to move my business forward and you're going to help us grow. You're going to help us capture revenue. So when you ask about what are the things emotionally that brands can do, yes, we need to know why we exist. That's our values. But then we have to be clear on our value. What is the value that people get from us? And we have to be very clear on how we are different. So people don't buy better, they buy different. There's this saying that different is better than better. So you have to be really clear on our values as a business, our principles, our integrity, paired up with our value, our one value that makes us different. Then we have to figure out what is a narrative and how we tell that story in the most resonant way. Because now we've identified what is the core of our business that we care about and we believe others will care about. That's the first piece of emotional resonance. You have to find that thing that when people learn it or know it, they immediately love it and they value it. You have to know that thing. And then you have to decide, okay, what are the stories that we need to tell around this that will connect with our audience in a very resonant way? And they have to be about the audience. Donald Miller talks about this a lot with Story Brand. They have to be the hero. You have to be the guide. So then the emotional resonance is that you're talking about them. You're not talking about yourself. you're presenting them in an experience that they can envision, that once they interact with your brand, their life is enhanced and is better. But you're telling those stories. So it's really about clarity, and then it's
Yep.
about storytelling that presents that clarity in a very connected way to them, and it's about them. And that's really kind of as simple as it is in terms of creating emotional resonance in our experience.
I love that. And I think this is where so many businesses tend to go wrong is they establish the foundations of this is who we are, but then they use that to form all of their marketing instead of this is who we are, this is who we serve, and who we serve is the hero of every story we tell. So I see
That's right.
I'm about to start offering some pro bono sessions here and coaching sessions here in Nashville for small business owners. And because the mistake that I see over and over and over again is these solo practitioners, these healers, small business owners are constantly using I-centric language. I will give you rather than you will experience. And they make their entire business and brand all about them. So unless I know that practitioner, that CEO, that business owner, I don't feel anything towards them and what they're offering because their language is all centered around them.
That is 100% right. You are so spot on. The best example I thought of while you're talking about is for marketers, it's infamous, but the infamous example of Steve Jobs introducing the first ever iPod Nano.
Ooh, okay.
Right. So the first iPod was thick, it was big, it had the wheel. iPod Nano.
I still have mine. Somewhere in the box. I still have mine.
We'll keep it because that's probably no joke worth about $4,000 on eBay.
I wish it worked. It doesn't work anymore.
Oh, well, it's still amazing. But the best example of what you're talking about, which is how to use language that is not about, hey, I do this, I do this, I do this. But, I believe, and you make it about them. Good example, Steve Jobs, when he introduced iPod Nano, it wasn't, we are creating an MP3 player that is fast, it processes and allows you to have access to your music. The fastest thing is like, oh, what's this pocket made for? Did you ever wonder about that? Then he pulls out the iPod Nano and he's like, 10,000 songs in your pocket. That's it. So that statement of 10,000 songs in your pocket was everything, because what it allows the consumer to do is envision, those are my songs. That's my music. It's not 10,000, it's 10,000 songs in your pocket. Great. That's my music. All the connection points. I have access to my music. I have access to a lot of it. It's small enough to fit in my pocket, so it's easy for me to use. There's all these connection points that consumers draw on the back end, and they close the loop. And that's the other piece of emotional resonance that we talk a lot about human is you do not tell a story that is right on the nose and takes them exactly where you want them to go, because there's no curiosity, there's no intrigue in that. You take them 75 to 80% of the way and you stop. And you let them close a loop, because when they close a loop, they feel like they're in on the secret. They feel like they're part of it and they feel intelligent. So in that example, Steve Jobs was like 10,000 songs in your pocket. And here's what I mean by that. What I mean by that is it's your music. They just stopped 10,000 songs in your pocket. That's it. And then you close the loop of like, oh, it's my music. You're not like, well, how did I get my music on there? Do I plug it in? You're not worried about that. They close the loop of like, whoa, I have access to my music. It's small. And they close that loop, and suddenly what Steve Jobs is trying to portray is this is magical. It does. It feels magical to the end consumer. And that's sort of how you tie it together, which I think is really powerful.
I like that. And that's such a poignant example of Steve could have talked all about of like, here's the 3,000 features that Pick Your iPod has, but instead of focusing on the features, which happens a lot in B2B, it's like, how do we shift it to talk about the benefits? Because if you talk about the benefits, it evokes curiosity of how does that happen? So then they go and explore, answer it. So you get the curiosity, and then they feel empowered because they figured it out themselves, even 100%. If it's easy to figure out, but they then feel like they have, to some degree, a stake in the game now.
Yeah. Well, 100%. So,
Hey guys, real quick, this episode is sponsored by Parison Network. Parison Network is a matchmaking service that connects businesses to marketing agencies that will actually get you results. There's over 50,000 agencies in the United States alone, and picking the right one can feel, well, pretty impossible. Parison Network simplifies the entire process by doing all of the vetting for you. From the initial agency search to interviewing and vetting the top marketing agencies to getting proposals and helping you with the discovery call, Parison Network does it all. This way, you end up partnering with a marketing agency that actually delivers outcomes, not empty promises. If you're ready to stop wasting money on marketing that just doesn't work, visit ParisonNetwork.com and get your free agency search started today. That's ParisonNetwork.com, PERISSON network.com.
two quick points on that. That book I mentioned, Creativity Inc., Ed Catmull talks about, I wish I could remember the phrase, but there's this behavioral psychology tenet, which is, to your point, people, when they have skin in the game, they value it 10x more. So he gives the IKEA example. He's like, I'll summarize the story, but he tells a story about if you had someone build an IKEA bookshelf and they paid $150 for it, but they had to put all the work into it. We know the work. You have to go, buy, transport it, pull it together, read instructions, re-put a shelf on that you put on backwards and pull it back apart and put it back together, and you put all this effort into it. And suddenly you have a $150 bookshelf, black bookshelf against the wall. If someone were to come along and say, hey, I have a $2,000 bookshelf that is solid oak and I am moving and I don't want to move it, I will give it to you. He says that a lot of people say, no, thanks, because they're so attached to the IKEA bookshelf.
Yep.
I put work into that. I built it. And so, yeah, if people feel like they're part of something, they are attached to it. And then you talked about, there's also the concept of like reasons to believe, reasons to buy, right? Mm-hmm. Two sides of the exact same coin. A consumer needs to know and have access to both things, but do they need to have access to both things at the same time? No. It's a sequencing exercise. You don't say, hey, buy this because it's the fastest processor, so that's the reason to buy it. But the reason to believe us is we're Microsoft and we're really good at what we do. The cognitive load is too heavy. You're asking me to believe and to buy at the same time. So when you talk about emotional relevance, that's also leading with what is the reason to believe, and then you pair it up with the reason to buy. And I hate to sound like an Apple fanboy because, well, maybe I am, but yeah, I mean, another good example is the old school, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC commercials. Yep. And they went right at the tension, which is like, hey, PCs, they sell on reasons to buy, processor speed, all the tech specs.
Yeah.
The reason to buy a PC is tech specs and peripherals and all the things that people that really loved PCs absolutely knew. The values of the reason to buy this thing is it's cheaper and has peripherals and its operating system is whatever. It's not a closed operating system. So Apple went right at that. It's like, hey, they talk about all the reasons to buy. We're going to talk about the reasons to believe. You're an artist. As an artist, you should have the best access to the most creative tools that allow you to be creative so that you can make the art that you want. It's a totally different message. And it feels it feels way more inspiring because now it's like, oh, yeah, I believe that that's the thing that I want. I want to be an artist. I want to be creative. That's something I can believe. Now I'm going to go to the table stakes stuff of like, okay, but are you as fast as a PC? So all of it starts to get, in my mind, like super interesting from a tactic standpoint and a strategy standpoint.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I haven't read them yet. There's a lot of books of how do you market kind of like a cult leader. Because at this point, Apple, I'm not going to say it's a cult, but there's a lot of like cult-like behaviors of like, they have a very strong rallying point, and their rallying point is not the iPad ad. It's not the newest version of Mac. It's the brand identity and the sense of belonging that they've created. Because you look at like, I have a iPhone, but I'm not a MacBook user by any stretch of the imagination. But you look, it's like Mac and Apple have the cult following, but Dell doesn't, Lenovo doesn't, HP definitely doesn't. And so those now have, because they didn't build that sense of belonging, and that brand identity built around not the benefits, but the emotion, they now have to go sell on features.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, there's the idea that people buy people. And when you're buying a brand, you're buying whoever the figurehead is of that brand. And that's why there's so much talk now about small businesses. The CEOs should become a personal brand. We've all seen that brutal commercial with the McDonald's CEO taking a little nibble out of the burger. And I almost feel bad for him because I almost wonder if he's vegan or vegetarian because it's like, it looks so painful. Have you seen that commercial?
I've seen bits and pieces because now all the other CEOs are doing it. And you can just tell most of them don't like the food that they sell.
Well, yeah,
it's a little painful. Like we know enough as consumers about human emotion to tell that it's like they took a bite and then the camera cut off and then they spit that out.
Totally. Yeah. And then that was amazing. Well, and that's what brands should think about when you talk about the sense of belonging, that cult following, right? Is brands should decide, okay, if we have a very charismatic leader that we put in the forefront, then absolutely. If we do not, then we have to continue to create dialogue around the fact that we as a business care deeply. Because businesses that have a human as the forefront, that human can literally say, I care about, Steve Jobs would say, I care about art. I care about creativity. I care about the computer being like the bicycle for the mind, making us 10 times faster. And he as a human being can say, I care about these things. Now let's imagine that a business cares about the same things, but their leader is not charismatic and you kind of need them behind closed doors. That's okay. Then what you need to do is within all of your messaging, you have to beat that point, that story beat all the time, that we care deeply about X. That's what makes us different. Because earlier we talked about belonging and all this stuff. You want to purchase a product that you feel is made with intentionality and care, and that brand cares deeply about it, so that you're buying something that's quality and that they will back it up and they will support it. So that 100%. But
well, and I think we see this with Disney, where Disney was built all around Walt Disney. And he was the figurehead, the charismatic guy, and a lot of the marketing was centered around him, and he was in it. He dies, and then it becomes about the magic. And then and to some degree, Mickey Mouse got pulled into that in the 80s, 90s. And then they start to shift away from that to some degree, and they expand all these other like Disney universes and that they own, and the brand message is still there, but I do notice that it's been significantly diluted compared to what it used to be because of the shift that you're talking about.
That's right. Well, you're totally right, and it's always going to come down to human beings at the end of the day. Because Walt Disney, as a human, had a vision. He passes away. Next human could come in. You could have the smartest person with an MBA and phenomenal track record come into that business. But if they read the vision on paper and they don't feel it, they don't own it, they don't inherently believe in it, they're not going to be able to convey it. Everyone will see right through that. They're going to come in and say, we care about the magic of curiosity and imagination, and we want to continue the legacy of telling stories at Disney that resonate. Okay, they're going to say all the talking points, but unless they truly believe it, they're not. It's not going to translate to the way that they lead within the organization and the way that they make decisions within the organization. So it's so cliche, but it's so true when you hear all these cliches of like, businesses are all about the people that are in the business. And you're like, yes, 1,000%. It has to be about the people that are in the business. Do they truly believe in the mission and the vision? And do they truly have the ability to get it done at the caliber that you need? Because you could have a amazing vision, but if you give it to a mediocre team or a team that doesn't buy that vision, that amazing vision immediately gets watered down. But if you have a vision that's like, it's pretty good, but you have an amazing team, of people that love that vision, guess what this team does? They bring that vision up. So at the end of the
100%.
day, you're called human growth. We're called human design, but we go by human. It really is about the people. It comes full
Yep.
circle.
And I think the interesting thing is you can give the leaders all the scripts to say, but you can still tell whether or not somebody actually believes that. Like the
Yes.
passion, you can have all the passionate
Yeah.
words on paper, but
Yeah.
unless the person who is saying those words actually believes it, we have enough bullshit meters that we can kind of
Yeah.
tell to some degree.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, okay, do you have the charismatic leader? Great. If not, don't just give them a script. Use somebody else.
That's right.
Pull
Well,
them
and
in.
you're so spot on. And it goes back to put in the work to discover who you are as a brand and what you truly care about, your values and your value as well. Because let's give a quick example on the personal side. If you have a coach that's talking to an athlete, and the athletes need to know that the coach believes in them in order for that athlete to really perform. If a coach goes to the athlete and the assistant coach is like, hey, this quarterback is really good at quick reads and dumping the ball. And the coach is like, I don't really believe that, but okay, I'm told that. And he goes to the player and he's like, hey, here's what you're really good at this. The player can sense that the coach doesn't believe that. So if the coach doesn't truly believe that, what the coach should do is say, I hear you that he's good at that, but what do I truly believe he's really good at that I get excited about?
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be like, oh, I love how he rolls out of the pocket and how he does. Then that's what you go focus on. So when you go to the quarterback, you're like, hey, here's what I love that you bring to the team, because I'm going to exude authenticity. Brands are the same way. If an agency goes to a brand and like, hey, brand, you should talk about this thing because that's what you're really good at. But the leadership team and the employees, they just don't feel it. Then don't force them to go talk about that. If there's a secondary option that is equally as potent to the consumer, then find that secondary option that is equally as potent externally, but internally, everyone can buy into it. And now they're like, yes, that is what we're known for. So when they're at conferences or cocktail parties or on podcasts and they're talking about it, that other people may be like, hey, you're known for this one thing. Like, yeah, we're good at that. But you know what we're really good at? And then it just exudes that confidence and that care.
And that's where you match passion with speaking points.
Yes.
Like, okay, if I'm passionate about this part of the company, I shouldn't be talking about something over here on this other side.
Right.
Let somebody else handle that, do that. And the same is true. And that's very like PR example, but the same is true with like all of your marketing. You can have, especially if your CEO doesn't love being on camera for whatever reason, you can have multiple spokespeople, and it doesn't have to be that they have the title. It could be an entry level employee, but let the people talk about what they're passionate about, and then your consumers pick up on that, and then they get on board with that aspect of the vision. They get indoctrinated, and then they eventually buy into the entire vision. And by that point, you have them as a loyal customer and you get to keep them forever. And so like everybody who loves Apple, they are never going to go back to Android or to Galaxy or to HP or to Dell. They're going to have to make decisions now within the Apple universe of, okay, now comes the logic part of what do I actually need to be able to run Adobe or whatever my gaming software is. But they have been indoctrinated into the brand. And once you have them as a brand customer, they're generally, unless you really screw up as a brand, they're never going to leave and you get to keep them in. So you just have to figure out what's the best way to pull XYZ person that I know everything about because I built out that client avatar and bring them into the right aspect of my business. And then we get to indoctrinate them even deeper.
Yeah. And they're willing to put up with some pain points, and they it was the old arguments that people would say back in the day of like, well, Apple doesn't have, yes, they have an ecosystem, but you can't connect to XYZ. And I remember talking to PC friends and they weren't wrong. It's like, well, you don't have access to as many print, and like, they weren't wrong at all. But because we were so in love with the brand, we're like, yeah, you're right that it's a little bit more tedious to do it on an Apple, but everything else is so amazing that it's worth doing that tedious thing. And guess what? I found a hack and a workaround, and I'm okay with that. because yeah, all of this is fun. And the last thing, because I know we might be getting at time, but it then translates to all of the partnerships and all the way that you tell the story, right? Like we're going to find micro influencers or people that we want to partner with that authentically connect with the things that we care about. So when they talk about it, it's authentic and it's passionate. It's not, well, let's get this person that has 200,000 followers because everyone will read right through. It's like, hey, I love this brand because, they're just saying the talking points. But you have but ideally you send them the brief and you're like, hey, we'd love to have you promote this thing. Ideally, you've done your homework to where when they read it, like, oh, this is amazing. This perfectly matches who I am and what I believe. And yeah, this is great. Like, where was this? I love to promote this.
Right. So, 100%. And like the brand that comes to me with that is like Georgia Pacific, which is B2B paper towels and among other things.
Yeah.
But they're in like the aquarium. So it's like, okay, if Georgia Pacific for some reason went B2C and they were looking for influencers, you don't just go to the people who match your target audience on a superficial level of like, okay, they're female, ages this to this, they live in this part of the city, they have this income, XYZ. It's like, no, what's on the deeper human level? Like, how do we go deeper of like, no, even if they have a small audience and maybe the demographic is somewhat different-ish, they're really passionate about wildlife and we have a wildlife fund and we invest heavily into ecological foundations, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the influencers they should be going after because we have, as a society, started to get more jaded by the influencer industry because we know they are essentially slowly becoming just spokespersons for whoever's going to pay them some money.
Pretty much.
So how do you bring the passion back? And how do you kind of reverse the trend that the influencer industry is going so that you're hiring an influencer who would actually use your product, who cares about XYZ aspect of your company, and so they can actually get behind it. And it's going to increase visibility overall. That video, that post is going to perform significantly better. You're going to get more sales because you went deeper than just the basic target demographics.
That's right. Yep.
So people are complicated, but the more we can humanize things, the better. I would like to dive into brand clarity, but that feels like it's going to be a separate conversation. So we've talked about the complexity of human beings. Number one takeaway that somebody could implement right now, what would you recommend?
Number one takeaway is specific, and you're asking number one takeaway specific to how do you talk to
what's something humans? What is something that a business owner can implement right now to make their brand more human?
Doing a quick exercise internally of what things should we eliminate that are preventing emotional connection with our consumers. That's the number one thing I would do, because it's hard for a business to want to create something new or to do something new. If you went in a business and you said, what's the number one thing that this business needs to do? If I say, you know what, you need to cast a vision and change things, and as much as I might believe that, people want to say no to that versus the fear of, what you should do is you should eliminate these things that are hurting you. Okay. So the number one thing they should do is do an audit of what do we have on our marketing docket, on our brand messaging, et cetera, that we are planning to ship, that we should do an audit and decide, should we say yes to that or should we say no to that? So that way it's not about we need to create something new and change the way we think. And this is really, and Aly said something that hit me and we got to implement this. But that just feels big and daunting, even if it gets me excited, versus people typically act on threats and fear. So go to that. What would be a potential threat if we ship this thing? It's actually talking about facts and not emotion. So the number one thing they can do is do an audit. Do an audit of what you have in your existing pipeline. And then be ruthless about, is this something we want to do? Yes or no? And it's that idea of like a lot of vision or a lot of growth happens through reduction. So go and reduce the things that you're planning to do that will not connect on an emotional level. Just say no to that. Even if you've spent money on it, just take it as a learning, call it a loss leader, and say no to that. And don't ship that campaign. Don't ship that product. Don't ship that email that talks about a certain feature. Say no to it. That's the number one thing I would do. The first thing I would do.
Awesome. I love it. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the show today. If people would like to connect with you further, what's the best way for them to find you?
Best way is humandesign.com. That's my company. Or you can do at John Weiss on any social platform.
Awesome. For everyone tuning in today, thank you so much for joining, and we will catch you on the next episode of Humans of Growth.
Thanks, Aly.